The author of the book, Andrew Chen, is one of the people responsible for growing the number of Uber riders, and which is now a global phenomenon and super successful company. And currently, Andrew Chen is one of the partners in Andreessen Horowitz, which is the one of the largest venture capitalist firms in the world. And in this book, The Cold Start Problem, he breaks down the different stages a startup usually undergoes and how they're able to scale to become global brands and super successful. So, as usual, I have my five key takeaways. And let's start with the first one. Or before that, is let's define network effects. So, according to Andrew Chen, a lot of these startups, he's noticed that they were able to scale quickly and be successful because of what they call network effects. So network effects is described as what happens when products get more valuable as more people use them. So one example here are marketplace products. The more buyers and sellers are actually enlisted in the market, the more valuable it becomes, right? So network effects basically starts from a small group, a small cluster, and is able to grow to a massive scale. And the larger it grows, the more valuable the solution becomes. So the first stage is called the cold start. So this is where most startups really struggle, right? How can you add the small group of the right people at the right time using the products the right way? So one example there is Facebook. They didn't start to become a global phenomenon, one of the largest, if not the largest social platform in the world, instantly, right? They started in a small group, a small close group, Harvard, which eventually scaled out. So this is what you call the atomic network. The atomic network is basically the smallest stable engaged network where other network can be built then copy pasted in different markets. So I gave an example earlier. Facebook, they started in Harvard, the school, and then they were able to grow out and expand as they added more users. One of the interesting rules that he said here is the 110 and 100 rule. So according to him, there's 1% that may start a thread within a group or a forum, and 10% of those populations are actively engaging, commenting, and whatnot, while the others benefit from it. So one example there perhaps would be Facebook groups. Haven't we noticed that there's a very small percentage of people who usually starts thought-provoking topics, while a lot of people engage in that, and in the result, a lot of people benefit from this community sharing. There's also one interesting nugget of wisdom he shared here is identify the hard side. So in any startup, in any business, there's always what you call the hard side. Usually it's the supply side. So for example, in Wikipedia, the hard side are the contributors, right? As long as you're able to solve the hard side, it would be easier to add users to use and adopt your platform. Similar to Shopee, right? If there are multiple sellers, we have a lot of price savings, selections for products, more and more buyers would want to join your platform. So that's a cold start. The second one is the tipping point. So the tipping point is what happens when network effects tip over on their own, right? It's a repeatable strategy for building many more networks to expand the market. So one example he gave there was Tinder. It initially started at a single college. They threw parties with all of the people who were influential in that college to join the app, to swipe right if they're attracted to a certain person. So when they refined the strategy in one certain college, they were easily able to identify the best practices on how were they able to successfully do it in one college, which can be replicated in various other colleges and now has expanded to a global phenomenon, right? So the tipping point when network effects tip over on their own. The third stage is escape velocity. So this is where you need to focus on strengthening your network effects to sustain your growth. So there are three strategies for you to be able to escape velocity and sustain growth. The first one is the acquisition effect. This is what happens when you're able to think of a way to dramatically decrease your cost to add more users, add more subscribers. And one example here was LinkedIn. So haven't we noticed that LinkedIn, very successful now, purchased by Microsoft, were able to do this in a low cost way. They were able to do it by recommended friends feature. So because of this, people started to invite their friends, their colleague to join the platform, further decreasing the cost of acquisition of new subscribers. The second one is engagement effect. So in order for you to sustain growth, you need to ensure that your users are actively engaged using the platform on a regular basis. So Twitter is one example he gave, wherein sometimes you receive an email that the past Twitter activity done by your friends, or your friends can actually tag you. Because of this, if you're not that active, you don't check Twitter regularly, but because you're drawn by your friends, your colleagues, you're drawn to actually use it again. And the last one is economic effect. So this is when you'll be able to increase your average revenue per user. So this is where if you have a baseline solution, baseline package, you could tier it in come up with a tiered pricing where you could have a premium pricing for those who are most active. In effect, you're actually increasing your average revenue per user. The fourth one is hitting the ceiling. Every startup is bound to encounter this, wherein they've been growing so fast, but eventually they would hit a ceiling and growth stalls, right? Growth, it would be stagnant, they would plateau. So the common causes of this is, of course, market saturation, degradation of marketing channels, churn of your early users, and so on and so forth. So one of the strategies for you to avoid, hitting the ceiling and still propel growth is look at the adjacent user. So similar to your existing target market, but perhaps in a different geography, or perhaps with different demographics. One example there is if your main customers are men, is there a way for you to cater to the women? So these strategies are able to extend your or prolong your success or your growth by targeting adjacent markets. And the last one is building a moat. So this is how, if you're the market leader, how can you leverage on network effects to fend off competitors? One great example here was Airbnb, right? They initially started by simply offering airbeds in their spare room. They wanted to expand to Europe, and they had a copycat, Wimdu, who received several millions of dollars of funding. And because it was their home country in Europe, um, they posed a huge threat to Airbnb. But what Airbnb is, they leveraged on their network, right? They leveraged on their hosts, the high quality host that they services that their host provides. And because of this, they were able to replicate what was working well with them in America, having good hosts, providing really quality service. And despite Wimdu having receiving more funding, Airbnb was able to still remain market dominance because they were able to leverage on these networks effects. So building a moat is leveraging on your existing network, on your key strengths to fend off other competitors. And again, that's all for this book. Those are my 5 key takeaways. And if you liked that, I do one every Sunday. Go to youtube.com, search Paulo Balinas, and I do have many, many other summaries there. Thank you, and see you again next Sunday.